Please. I wasn't getting worked up by that. That was a pizza burp. Is Heat Blast on this shirt? Because he certainly feels like he's wearing it. So let's say your favorite mainline franchise gets second-tier tie-in material. Sometimes it's dubious video games, other times it's novels or comics, maybe even cameos in other media. Can these things truly fit in with their original material, or are they just neat ideas on paper? Oh, if only there were someone willing to assemble the disparate pieces of loose canon. Yo! It's Matt, and today's topic is DC Comics' short story variety series Cartoon Network Action Pack, or Snap for short. Running from August of 2006 through May of 2012, Snap was home to many classic Cartoon Network faces: KND, Juniper Lee, PPG, Megas XLR, Samurai Jack, Secret Saturdays, and Generator Rex, to name a few, but today we'll be focusing on an unexpected star that ended up taking most of the series spotlight: Ben 10. This episode, particularly the original series era. Oh, got a little too talkative with my hands there. I'm mainly covering it because I missed out on most of the OS Snap titles as a kid, only living vicariously through window shopping at Books A Million or Toys R Us, and occasionally sneaking a free read here and there. I've always wanted an excuse to deep dive on them, and lo and behold, someone once asked Man of Action member Duncan Rouleau if the Snap comics were canon to the classic continuity. Duncan is typically pretty accepting of fan theories that he's approached with, and gave this one a thumbs up. But here's where things get dicey. If you're not familiar with the rules of canon that I've laid out for the Ben 10 timeline doc, this is where the recency caveat comes into play. As I've stated before, within Ben 10, there's creator statement retcons, changes made by writers, and then there's in-universe retcons, of course, also made by writers, but more so tangible changes to the show's reality made by Celestial Sapien characters, perceptible by the other show's characters. The simple version is the most recent series has the final say until the next bigger, badder series to save the day throws their hat in the ring. And of course, this applies to both creator statement retcons and in-universe retcons. This is a handy chart that maps which series each respective creator has authority to make statements about, and how much authority those statements hold. The grounds on which their weight is based are how recent their involvement in canon is, and how close the creator making the statement is to the media that they're commenting on. For example, the recency caveat grants Omniverse creators free reign over all previous continuity, but of course that doesn't then invalidate all statements made by previous contributors. It's also important to be wary of the opposite. You see, for years many people have assumed that since Man of Action are credited in every episode as the creators of Ben 10, it follows that they must be involved with every series following and are the appropriate authority for literally everything Ben 10 related, and that's just not the case. They only worked on the original series, and they didn't do it alone either. So in addition to the first example, someone like Duncan shouldn't be qualified to make creator statements about any series except OS, and separately the reboot, because he didn't work on any of the others in the classic continuity, and more recent creators' statements hold more weight than his because of the recency caveat. All that said, here's the conundrum at hand when it comes to Snap. Someone asks Duncan if the Snap comics are canon. He says yes. Someone asks Charlotte Fullerton McDuffie if the Snap comics are canon. She says no. Duncan worked on the original series, and their Snap comics based directly on that crew's work. Charlotte worked on all three following shows in the rest of the original continuity, which not only also have Snap comics based on them, but she also personally wrote 5 issues of the series. Who do you listen to here? How do you parse this problem out? Charlotte has the advantage because she effectively has more experience writing Ben 10 than Duncan, and is qualified to comment on it due to her work both on the show and on the comics. Conversely though, while Duncan didn't work on the comics, he did work on the original series. Maybe he can be a bit liberal in handing out yeses, and sure, there was that one time he said that production art for OS must have been fan art because I guess he forgot what his own pilot looked like.
This image I've been seeing, I hope I'm sharing this correctly. Yeah, that's not, that's a fan piece. This is a fan piece. This had nothing to do with any development that I'm aware of. If there was some internal Cartoon Network development, somebody drew up some pieces, that's always a possibility, but then it never got beyond those kind of drawings.
Let's just put all that aside for a second. The point of making the Ben 10 timeline doc at all was to explore as much material linked to this continuity and to take as many opportunities, at least within reason, to be inclusive as possible. What if Duncan is right, but there's a ton of things that conflict and don't fit? What if Charlotte is right, but there's a ton of great opportunities you could be including, but you're missing out on them? This is where we start from scratch. Most all Snap stories from OS all the way to UA are super short, and aside from a few incredibly minor nods in the OS ones only, they are vastly disconnected. Simply put, there's not a lot of meat on these bones, it's more famine than it is feast. Were this something like the DCAU's tie-in comics, where they're all full-length issues, some with interconnected multi-part stories, or they almost always reference series events, it'd be much easier to categorize them. In this case, as the comic title implies, the point was to feature multiple short stories all in the same package. Not really an impressive feat to jam-pack one whole story into a single issue. Only one time did we ever get a Snap issue that had one full-length focus story, but even that was a crossover too. Jury's still out on Hero x2, at least on the Generator Rex side of things, but it checks out on the Ultimate Alien end. I'll eventually loop around in Timeline Gen Rex after I'm finished rewatching UA. We'll get to that later. Despite the limitations of Snap's format, the nature of Ben 10 offers some surprisingly helpful quirks that immediately rule out some players, especially the original series. First off, the road trip being limited to a span of 3 months' time. So there's some stops along the road trip, the introduction of additional aliens post-season 1, and whether or not Ben and Gwen are fully aware of the plumbers yet because of secrets and truth. From here forward, each story can be put into one of 3 categories based on its level of detail and how much it does or doesn't add to canon, as follows. The first category is for stories with enough specific detail that you can parse out its placement on the timeline and ideally fit them into gaps between episodes in a span of roughly 3 months. It must not include details that are irrevocably in conflict with on-screen events. Stories that, while not all creators across the board may consider them to be, add something significant to canon and have more reasons for than against them working. The second category is for completely neutral stories that are either so vague or completely lack detail to a point where it can't really be dismissed or placed without some heavy dissection. Category 1 gets first pickings, and provided there's still space on the timeline and the remaining Category 2 stories are somewhat workable, they'll already have upgraded to Category 1. Any leftovers still here by the end are pretty much a mystery. The third category is for stories that are just laughably non-canon. This can be due to anything from road trip or calendar conflicts to additional aliens debuting at the wrong time, or to important plot points happening in the complete wrong order. Stories that are irrevocably and undoubtedly non-canon. So, without further ado, let's start with the rejects. Olé! With this story taking place in Mexico, the earliest you could place it would have to be after Ultimate Weapon, as that's commonly cited as Ben and Gwen's first experience outside the US. However, the gang seemed pretty eager to get back home after the Mayan sword stuff, and while it's not impossible they stuck around, I don't think it's super likely that they did. Not canon. Fast lane! Some points in this issue's corner to begin with. They mention an ordeal at a Louisiana ant farm on a Monday, giving us a date and a location. We love those here. And the premise of Max having a racer friend from back in the day could give legitimacy to his comment from Framed about his experience stock car racing.
You know, times like this, my stock car driving experience really comes in handy.
Things kind of fall apart though. There's like an odd mythos about a haunted car. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. An upgrade very slowly times out in an extremely public place. I'm gonna give this one a big ol' not canon. Snowblind. This issue specifically states that it takes place in July on Mount Packer, Colorado, over the course of 2 days. Though decidedly this is before Secrets, as the kids don't know Max is a plumber yet, which creates a problem. July doesn't start until sometime after Secrets, even with earlier estimates, pushing some dates forward. This likely can't be canon based on the date mentioned. Sadly, not canon, but still worth a read. Fear itself. This story doesn't offer up any relative location and has a very uncharacteristically hospitable Ben. This is one of only 2 issues throughout the entire run of Snap that have annotated references, and as cool as it would be to canonize the future issue that cites this one that features Blitzwolfer, it just doesn't add enough to be able to place it anywhere or really end up being worth it. Not canon. Techno Zombies. While this one offers up that the Tennysons were in the middle of traveling to Portland, Oregon, and does make references to historical figure William Shakespeare, it's still not specific enough to include. Not canon, but worth the read for the pseudo-OS Lord Decibel kind of villain. Barbershop Blues. Easily the worst Ben 10 Snap story of the entire 6-year run. It's just all over the place, barely comprehensible plot, no timeline details, and young Wild Mutt being able to shoot quills, which only I'm pretty sure adult Vulpmancer should be able to do. Not canon. The Height of Heat. Unfortunately, another dud, not canon. But hey, there's Ethan Beaver. You guys should give him a look. He's doing the DCAU Justice League Infinity comic, and it is a beaut. Mwah! Swimming with sharks. So, a few problems here. 1, no landmarks. 2, upgrade I guess can just seep through the water to redirect underwater missiles. And 3, the comic mistakenly claims Max served in the Army and not the Air Force. Not canon. Eggs with legs. Props for the egg puns, but with another Animo-centric issue falling way more in line with canon than this one, which doesn't have a lot to offer, let's be honest. Wouldn't make a lot of sense. I bid you a hearty not canon. Aqua Nut. Stop me if this sounds familiar. A doctor/scientist character doesn't get their government funding/accreditation and uses their animal research to wreak havoc. Is Dr. Undertow just Animo but make it fish? Yes. Does this issue offer anything? Nope. Not canon. Sonic Boom! I guess with an alien combatant coming to Earth for the Omnitrix, you could maybe put this after Grudge Match, but still hardly anything else you could go on. It's an okay issue, but not canon. Pleasant Dreams. As mentioned before, this would normally be a prime candidate, as you could more easily narrow this down to being after Blitzwolfer's debut in Benwolf, but as this issue cites another non-canon one as its premise, I must sadly declare, not canon. Captured. This is a super fun issue. It's kind of like a role reversal of a small problem, but sadly offers no timeline clues. Mad props to the Days of Future Past reference on the cover, but with a heavy heart I missed bid our last, not canon. Up next, Category 2, Dora Flora. The only entry in Category 2, and for a good reason. Dora Flora is a genuinely cool story. The Tennysons, accompanied by Max's old friend, Matthew, nice name, explore a specifically post-Hurricane Katrina Louisiana bayou. Ben's interest is piqued when a swamp monster and a missing girl named Dora Wrightson come to the forefront. I won't spoil the issue's plot because I highly recommend reading it for yourself, but I will explain my hesitancy in regards to considering it canon. For those unaware, though I originally hail from Western New York, I've been a Floridian for about 18 years. My time here, I've experienced many a close call and endured the near destruction of my hometown during 2018's devastating Hurricane Michael. Suffice to say, I have the utmost respect for those who've endured anything similar, and of course far, far worse. With the original series taking place in 2005, from what our notes can tell us, that being the same year Hurricane Katrina hit, not only would exploring their swamplands so soon after be logistically impossible, but it might even require moving the date of Katrina's landfall, and I'm just not comfortable with casually playing around with a real historical event involving a lot of human suffering. Discord user Tron Travolta suggested a palatable compromise in the form of considering this an Omniverse Summer of 2006 flashback story, which I am more comfortable with, but still. This one has enough details to match what Tron suggested for sure, and truly is a neat story, but I'm personally still stuck in the middle. Maybe canon. Up next, Category 1, baby. A Villain a Day. This story gives us Littleville, USA, the second later-to-be-cited annotation of Urban Gorilla, and is definitively before Ben gains his 11th alien in The Big Tick. A Villain a Day sees Team Tennyson encounter a cabal of 10 villains in a small town that may rival Ben's roster of 10. Definitely one worth reading on your own. Hashtag canonize Urban Monkey. In real life, there exist 4 Littlevilles in the United States: Massachusetts, New York, Kentucky, or Alabama. with Ben being well aware he only has access to 10 aliens as early on as the first episode.
You're one of 10 super cool alien dudes!
And Hunted being followed by Tourist Trap, which is widely thought to be an homage to Casey, Illinois' larger-than-life attractions. That brings us to the next episode stop in New York City, New York. It's entirely possible that in between Tourist Trap and Kevin 11, Team Tennyson visited either the Kentucky Littleville or the New York Littleville over the course of a single day. Very likely canon. Blast from the past. My main instinct to save time was to have this similarly snow-capped issue take place on the same day as Snowblind, but this story in particular deals with Ben and Gwen now being aware of Max's career as a plumber, whereas Snowblind took place prior to that reveal, so those two stories can't coexist anywhere near each other. As Secrets and Truth take place in South Dakota and the Big Tick takes place in Wyoming, the closest place for skiing between the two would be the Wolf Creek ski area in Colorado, so this could definitely work. Very likely canon. Nemesis. Super fun story here with a lot of potential and a genuinely cool original villain. Please go read this. Because Gwen mentions that she doesn't have powers, this is likely before Lucky Girl, and as seen on one of the jewelry store signs, this could take place in anywhere 3 places in the US called Bijou: Louisiana, Colorado, or California. The Alliance takes place in New Mexico, and with the last laugh being undefined, it's possible Nemesis takes place over one day in Colorado. Very likely canon and highly worth the read. Space Camp and beyond! A Space Camp kid gets contacted by aliens from another dimension, and he rigs a NASA shuttle simulator to actually take off and meet them with the promise that he'd become an overlord amongst humans, unwittingly bringing the Tennyson kids along for the shenanigans. Ben mentions having some intergalactic experience prior to this issue's events, possibly referring to Grudge Match, but more than likely implying that they've experienced the events of The Return / Be Afraid of the Dark. This issue would be great to develop Max's initial NASA stint and would potentially take place around Divided We Stand and Don't Drink the Water, as the Tennysons are already in Florida around that time. Absolutely buck wild and deserving of canonicity. Greasy Lightning. The Tennysons are ambushed by mechamorph-like serpent arachnid aliens in pursuit of the Omnitrix. Maybe they're wearing a form of mechamorph battle armor. The Tennysons refer to the Omnitrix by name, meaning this issue follows the events of Hunted and also happens to take place in Death Valley, California. Not to be confused with Desert Valley from Merry Christmas. Trust me, I've checked, they have a map in the episode, it's Texas! With the next closest canonical pit stop being Las Vegas, Nevada in Tough Luck, very likely canon. Monkey business. That's right, the issue you've all waited for, the story that started #canonize Infinite Monkey, and by far the most promising one yet. This story cites Urban Gorilla from A Villain Today, Max mentions having a friend or two still working at the White House, features an escaped Animo still in Washington, D.C., post-Washington, B.C., and Cannonbolt, post The Big Tick. Animo somehow created an all-powerful cosmic super primate by the name of Infinite Monkey, along with an army of sentient apes, and commanded them to storm the White House.
We're totally insane.
They pushed me out and faced me!
Those are the best.
Ben somehow convinces Infinite Monkey to leave Earth to rule a newly forming galaxy 17 light years away, and Infinite Monkey wipes the memories of everybody there and then leaves. To me, it's no coincidence that after escaping jail only to have a memory blackout, wake up being arrested and surrounded by hyper-evolved primates, and knowing that Ben Tennyson was yet again involved, but having no idea how he managed to thwart him this time. This loss drove Dr. Animo over the deep end. It's no coincidence either that the next appearance, Dr. Animo in the Mutant Ray, he just so happens to have taken on a gorilla-like appearance with his new hardware. This issue has to take place after Secrets and The Big Tick, but probably before the Unnaturals. The president in this one looks like Bush, but the one in Unnaturals looks like Cheney, so maybe something happened to Bush in this universe and then Cheney took over? I don't know. Best candidate is after the Galactic Enforcers, Pittsburgh being near DC, and before Camp Fear, as that's an unknown location. #canonize Infinite Monkey. Intergalactic Whoa Club. So, aside from the repeated use of that term. This issue asks what would happen if analogs for the creators of Superman, Schmeagol and Schmooster, were themselves alien immigrants called Meathmen, who disguised themselves as humans and sold alien religious propaganda to the public as a work of fiction. Some of their stories chronicle a messianic Guardians of Oa type species called the Goalitarians, who the Meatmen seem to worship, going from warlords to vessels of peace. Others are about a fire-breathing bird-like species called the Flock Crow fighting a space war. Turns out the Flock Crow aren't very happy with their depiction and are crawling around the convention looking to assassinate Schmeagol and Schmooster. Incredibly weird read, but oddly charming. Before I explain how this fits, this story is jam-packed with cameos. Stormtrooper, Han, Chewie, SpongeBob. You got Superman, Flash, Batman, Shazam, Image Comics, Super Alien Hero Buddy Adventures, the Bandai Heat Blast Epic Alien figure, Fantastic Four, Wolverine, Captain America, Star Trek, and the San Diego Comic-Con logo. Also, as suggested by my good friend Roxy, you could say this might be where the Omnitrix sampled the DNA for the likes of the scrapped Sonic Screeching alien bird mentioned in the I-10 special, or the fandom named Arano from that one magazine. I imagine even though the background signs are meant to parody San Diego Comic-Con, this would work perfectly as the nearby convention Ben mentioned in Monster Weather, taking place the following day in
Milwaukee!
Very likely canon. Charmed to beat you. This one directly mentions taking place after Tough Luck, but logistically needs to happen before Don't Drink the Water, as Hex obviously isn't a little tiny baby man here.
I'm gonna call you baby man, baby man!
It's a little bit odd to see Ben transform so publicly in this issue, but then again, he does that constantly throughout the show and doesn't get discovered for another 6 years. As Hex must have somehow resurrected the charms of Bazel again prior to this issue, their destruction once more at the end could easily account for his drained elderly form in his next appearance. I ended up fitting this as a quick rest stop between Merry Christmas and Benwolf, while the Tennysons traveled from Texas to Arizona, most plausibly canon. The Once and Future Ben. This is one of the issues that I have vivid memories of sneaking a free read of. This story acts as a follow-up to Ben 10,000, having Ben's future counterpart travel back in time to warn him and Gwen of a menacing Chimera sui generis descendant from even further in the future, known as Vilgax 3000. Also, Jonah Melville is there, I guess. I hate to spoil this detail because I highly suggest catching this issue in particular, but I have to explain it in order to justify its case for canonicity, so I'll keep the context brief. Ben unlocks Arctiguana in this issue, and it actually fills in a gap further down the line. Arctiguana was planned to show up in Omniverse's flashbacks, but the most we ever got for him was young Ben being familiar with Arctiguana as one of his active unlocked forms in Ben Again, albeit using his older self's body.
Ben?
No worries, Gwen. I finally got an alien I know how to use.
As well as Arctiguana being present in young Kevin's second amalgam mutation from Weapon 11.
This batch is even better than the last one!
This story is the perfect explanation for the unlock. For the timeline clue, Ben 10,000 is obviously the early point, with that episode taking place in South Dakota, and A Change of Face taking place in Salem, Massachusetts. As for this story's location, we get Jellystone Park, an obvious nod to the Yogi Bear cartoons. Now, as far as I can tell, while there are currently many more than just the following two, the only tourist attractions called Jellystone Park that might have existed around 2005 IRL and reside somewhere near South Dakota and Massachusetts are the ones in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Both are equally plausible. You should read this issue canon. Special defects. Max is invited to drop by the movie set of an old friend named Pietro, who bears a striking resemblance to George Lucas, no? Is that just me? Pietro treats them to a tour, and shenanigans ensue when an ex-special effects wizard turned super scientist attacks. Blitzwolfer and Wildvine keep things under wraps, and the Tennysons continue on their way. This issue could easily fit between Super Alien Hero Buddy Adventures and Monster Weather. I imagine in this scenario, Max may have called in a favor from Pietro off-screen to either help fix the rust bucket or let the kids into Planetary Pictures while it got fixed, because I don't know, maybe he directed a few of the movies that their theme park capitalizes on, and then he offered to give them a set tour the following day? Pretty much just conjecture at this point. I'd say sufficiently canon. Mountains of Trouble. Alright, this one I can't make a case for without spoiling it, so here goes. While the Tennysons check out Mount Rushmore's visitor center, a Tesla coil on exhibit there has a strange interaction with the Omnitrix, transforming Ben into Wildmutt and sending him back in time to Max and Phil's plumber days following Vilgax's defeat. Wildmutt, not being able to communicate verbally, of course, attempts to give Max hints, but to no avail, as a single shot from Hothead Phil's specialized plumber rifle sends Ben right back to the present. It's revealed that Wildmutt left an exhibit pamphlet from the present day back in the past, which Max held on to for all these years due to his conviction that the Vulpamancer was trying to communicate something to him. After putting everything together, Max brings Ben to the exhibit specifically to close the loop in the paradox, which explains why he's grinning like a psychopath in that earlier panel. This story has so much going for it in terms of being rooted in and adding to canon. Secrets and truth are directly mentioned, as is the fact that they're intended to take place on the same day. Max and Phil, having mentioned in truth that they've dealt with Vulpamancers before, now retroactively includes this incident, and makes a nod to them later wising up and using the sonic pitch emitters.
Vulpamancers never were big on small talk, even with their own kind.
Sorry about that, Ben. Only way to bring down the Vulpamancer.
Lucky for us, you had a sonic pitch whistle with you.
Phil explains this is his and Max's last day being plumbers, and offers not only context for his line in truth, but unintentionally context for the entire rest of the franchise's more intergalactic interpretation of the plumbers. The reason the base is shut down wasn't just because of the threat of Vilgax being all said and done, but because the human Earth plumbers were originally sanctioned by the US government going back to Washington's days in 1773. As many implications throughout the franchise assert, the plumbers were able to continue in secret when joining up with the Intergalactic Division. This issue also gives an early point for use of the Null Void, clearly establishes itself as taking place following Vilgax's defeat, and even goes as far as implying that Wes Green had already voluntarily stepped down from the plumbers by then, no doubt having something to do with an already desecrated native land being further desecrated just for the sake of a temporary military installation. Yikes, guys! Finally, this issue also implies that aside from Max likely having experience with Pyronites and Vilgax drones during his plumber tenure, another key factor in him correcting Ben's assumption that he's not a monster,
He's an alien. I mean, look at him. What else could he be?
was also because he remembered seeing the Omnitrix on Wildmutt during the incident depicted, which he had to have put together in like a span of less than 10 minutes. This issue has the details down pat. So, how about the timeline placement? They outright give us both an early and late point in tying this to their last time at Mount Rushmore, having been Secrets and Truth, with the Tennysons' next on-screen encounter there being Ben 10,000. If the 3-month time constraint weren't an issue, this would mean it could be placed anywhere between the two episodes, but because we're taking travel time into consideration, and this issue, along with Ben 10,000 and its follow-up issue, all have to do with time travel, I'd say it's appropriate to sandwich the two issues around that episode. So, after all that, let's review. Out of a total 25 stories, 11 are canon, 1 is a little bit up in the air, and 13 are non-canon. Of the 11 canon ones, here is their chronological order and which episodes are adjacent to them. These are the Season 1 stories, these are the Season 2 stories, these are the Season 3 stories, and this is the only Season 4 story. Now that we have the OS Snap issues worked out, the next videos I'm planning on doing are a closer look at the roadmap, as well as the Leapster Explorer Ben 10 Ultimate Alien game. There's actually a roadmap on sale in the Ink Tank store. I'm proud to have helped out on that. Link is going to be in the description. If you've never had the pleasure of reading Snap, the entire 6-year run of Ben 10 stories have been compiled. Link will also be in the description. What I'd love to know is, are there any canon or non-canon verdicts of mine that you disagreed with? And which of the OS stories was your favorite? Hit me up in the comments with your answers. While I'm wrapping things up, I want to mention that the Rules of Canon doc, the Ben 10 timeline doc, and moreover the entire revival of this channel pretty much would have never have been a thing if it weren't for the Watchtower Database, a YouTube channel consisting of 3 phenomenal creators dedicated to dissecting the DCAU and putting it in an order that makes sense. I hope to be for Ben 10 what they are for the DCAU. Please go subscribe to them with all your heart. Check out Roxy's art, give Tron's channel a look. All resources mentioned in this video are going to be linked down there in that description. Thanks for watching this episode of Loose Cannon, and make sure to subscribe so that you get it first. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. Oh man, I look red. Dang, I look red, man. Getting so sweaty, this Omnitrix is going to slip off.